Hello everyone, my name is Glenn Hames and I'd like to welcome you to our webinar, Navigating SMETA Audit, a comprehensive guide for ethical business practices. In the spirit of reconciliation, BSI Group acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. You've joined the webinar in listen-only mode, but you're welcome to ask questions throughout the webinar using the question box. We'll answer all the questions in the Q&A section at the end, and if any don't get back to you, will be answered after the webinar. We'll be sharing the recording with you. I'd like to encourage all of you to participate in the upcoming polls to have your say, and please bear with us if there are any technical difficulties. We'll fix those as soon as we can. Today we'll hear from you, our presenter, Magella Fury. Magella is an experienced professional specialising in food safety, quality, systems, enforcement and certification, with extensive expertise in auditing, training and consulting across a wide variety of food safety standards, including GFSI standards. She helps food producers and manufacturers comply with government regulations and major retailers' local and international food, safety and ethical audits. As a certified social compliance auditor and a qualified food safety auditor, Magella regularly undertakes SMETA audits and provides expert training to the food industry.
Thanks, Glenn, and thank you for having me here today to present to you on corporate social responsibility. Okay, so I think we've got...
You might start with the poll?
Yeah, I think that's what we're starting with, Glenn.
Okay, we have 3 polls here today, everyone. First poll is, does your business currently have a corporate social responsibility audit such as SMETA? And I'll just give everyone a few seconds if you could answer 1 yes, 2 no, 3 not yet but the audit has been planned, or 4 unsure. Thank you. Okay, if we could bring up the results. The results we can see here is quite interesting. Yes, we have 56%, no 27%, not yet 10%, and unsure 7%. So some interesting results there. Magella?
Okay, so yeah, we've got a mix. We've got people who have already had these audits. We've got some people who are probably in that stage. They know the audit's booked and probably getting ready for it. And some of you who are thinking about it, and those of you who are not quite sure what their business plans are. So I want to make sure that today's presentation is beneficial for everybody. For those of you who are really into it and know it, let's discuss it. For those of you who've got it coming up or planning it, let's talk about what to expect. So hopefully we'll get some good information across to all of you. Okay, so these are the 3 agenda items or topics we're going to cover today. We're going to cover the importance of corporate social responsibility for a business. If you're going to go down the corporate social responsibility path, why choose Sedex SMETA as your platform? And thirdly, how to prepare for an assessment or an audit. Okay, so let's get into our first topic, which is the importance in managing a corporate social responsibility platform for your business. In relation to this first topic, we're going to start off with 3 really good reasons as to why a business would want to have corporate social responsibility standards in place. Look, there's definitely more than 3 good reasons. There's probably infinite reasons, but we're just going to look at these top 3. Firstly, certification to a corporate social responsibility standard is often going to be required by maybe a retailer that you supply or some of your key customers. So they're saying you have to have it, so you have to do it if you want to maintain business with those customers. But we're also going to look at some other good reasons. We're going to look at the overlap between corporate social responsibility and ESG. Now, if at this point in the conversation you don't know what ESG is, that's fine. We're going to talk about that in a few slides. I'm also going to touch on the topic about corporate social responsibility and its benefits in attracting and retaining staff. Okay, but before we go any further, we're going to take a few minutes to clarify some interchangeable terms to save any confusion and maybe to make this topic a little bit clearer. Like most industries, the corporate social responsibility space has a variety of names that mean mostly the same thing. But when you're new, you might be like, hold on, what's that? What does that mean? Hold on, I thought we were talking about this and that. So we're going to talk about some terms that mean basically the same thing. So when we say, or you hear the term corporate social responsibility, or CSR, or social compliance, or ethical standards, or ethical auditing, they're all basically one and the same thing. Okay, so let's look at our first topic and the reason why we're putting in place corporate social responsibility standards. And that is it's often a requirement to trade with our key retailers and customers. Businesses that supply major retailers and major brands are often required to have CSR audits these days. So, you know, a CSR audit becomes a necessary thing to just do business. It's part of sort of like doing business with these customers. The second reason why we might want to put in place corporate social responsibility is that there is a direct overlap between corporate social responsibility and this newish sort of concept that's out there called ESG. Now, some of you out there may be very familiar with ESG, but for those of you who aren't, it stands for environmental, social, and governance. And it's also becoming a business requirement. ESG is a way of measuring a company's health and stability beyond the balance sheet. It ensures that businesses consider the importance of non-financial issues that could have a long-term impact on them. Now, this presentation is by no means a guide on how to implement ESG. There will be other training for that. Rather, I'm just trying to show you here that there's a direct overlap between CSR and ESG. So if you have CSR in place, or you put CSR in place, it will definitely help you in your business if you also have to go down the ESG preparation because of the overlap. Okay, so let's have a little look at this topic, ESG. So the E in ESG is for environmental, and within that environmental piece, there's 7 elements. Which are 1, energy. So it's asking your business, you know, are you driving efficiency? Or, I don't know, do you leave your lights on all day and night? Where's your energy source coming from? Is it coming from renewables? Is it coming from fossil fuels? It's also a section on greenhouse gas and greenhouse gas emission. So in Australia, where I'm from, so the Australian government, like all governments around the world, but the Australian government has set a target of net zero by 2050. So do you know what your country's targets are? And then once you know those, what's your business actually doing? Do you have a plan to match the government's reduction targets? Also, under the environmental topic is water. So here in Australia, we know a lot about drought. We have faced this many times, and I think we do genuinely have a pretty good understanding about not wasting water. It is actually a very precious resource. But what are your businesses doing to minimise water usage? And if you do have to use water, are there any opportunities to reuse the water in another sort of sustainable fashion? It also makes businesses look at pollution. Do you know what sorts of pollutions emanate from your manufacturing facility? And we're talking here about air pollution, water pollution, noise pollution. What sorts of controls do you have in place to address these? Waste is also included. Waste, very, very topical at the moment. How much waste is your business producing and discarding?
Do you have plans to minimise waste? Are there things we can do to just stop making product that we're not going to use? Or if the inevitable happens and we do end up with some waste product, what are we doing with it? How are we repurposing our waste? It also makes you look into the materials that you're using, like the raw materials to make the product that you sell. Where are they coming from? Are they coming from ethical sources? Are they coming from sustainable sources? Or are you using non-renewable resources or businesses that don't have ethical standards in place? It also makes businesses look at, are they encroaching on nature? Businesses should not allow their practices to encroach on parklands and riverways. I can't tell you the number of times when I'm doing my audits, and especially if a business does back onto a waterway or parkland, you're seeing hairnets down there, you're seeing packaging, staff lunches, that sort of thing. That shouldn't be happening. We can't allow our businesses to encroach on nature. Now, the S in the ESG is for social. And yes, it does include a lot of health and safety measures, but it's more than that. It's asking businesses to look at their staff diversity. It is obviously going to pull in place a lot of safe work practices as well. Does the business have health and safety policies? Are staff trained in these policies? Does the business have somebody like a senior person within the business that's responsible for health and safety so they can actually implement changes and have access to budgets to make changes? There's a core topic in there about modern day slavery. What actually is it? Letting people know, what does modern slavery look like? And once people know what it looks like, they're better able then to see examples of it. A lot of countries are also requiring businesses to report on modern day slavery. So in Australia, we have the Modern Slavery Act, and any business with a turnover of $100 million or more is required to produce an annual statement on its slavery risks and what that business is doing to address it. Health and safety assessments, so the equipment that you're using in your facility, if you do use equipment, have they been assessed? Are they now safe for people to operate those? It asks you to address fair pay. Do your workers get paid for all the work they do or just some of the work they do? Making you having a look at this. When they have to turn up to training, is it paid or do they have to come and do training in their own time? Looking at all these sorts of things within your business. Community. What does your business do? Does your business do anything in relation to giving back to the community? Do you donate? What do you do? Are you a good corporate citizen? What about your First Nations? Do we have policies and practices in place about our First Nations people? Do you have land right policies in place? And of course, a big section on human rights and knowing that everybody has the same rights and the same protection as everybody else. And finally, the G in ESG is about governance, economic, social, environmental value of the business. It's about the governance and how it actually operates. Okay, now we're going to move on to our third important reason as to why we want to put CSR in place. In relation to attracting and retaining your employees. It's not always just the younger employees, but often younger employees in general who aren't prepared to work for companies where there is no balance in their lives and the business culture does not respect and protect the environment. So younger generations in particular are prioritising going to companies or only staying at companies that have a strong company culture, have better working environment, allow them to prioritise work-life balance, and they have values that the younger generation can relate to. They want to be part of something bigger. They want to be part of a business that's linked to poor environmental practices. Attracting and keeping your workforce is also another reason why you might want to be going down this path. Okay, So that brings us to our second topic for the day. Why Sedex SMETA? Why would we go down that path if we want to put in place corporate social responsibility standards in our business? So there are numerous corporate social responsibility standards on the market that a business can choose to, be audited to or develop their systems against. Just a few of them. We've got SA 8000, there's ISO 26000, there's Fair Farms, there's Amphori, there's retailer standards, and there is Sedex SMETA. Now, if you're new to Sedex and SMETA, it can be a little confusing as to, hold on, what do both of these names mean and what actually is what? Because they both start with S and they both have 5 letters. It's a little confusing for new players. So just to help make it clear, Sedex is the name of the organisation. It stands for Supplier Ethical Database. And SMETA is their audit tool that they develop. So Sedex, the organisation, SMETA is the audit tool. So if you go down this path of being audited in this space, you will be audited to the SMETA audit methodology that Sedex developed. It's just the differences between those two names. Okay, so I think we've got to our second poll, which is here on the screen. Glenn, are you going to be our pollster here, or would you like me to read that out?
Sure. Thanks, Magella. Poll 2, moving to poll 2. How familiar are you with SMETA audits and their methodology? Number 1, very familiar. 2, somewhat familiar. 3, not familiar at all. And I'll just give everyone 15, 20 seconds to fill it in, please.
Just watching these results coming in now.
And results come through. Thank you for filling those in, everyone. Number 1, we came in at 16%. Number 2, somewhat familiar at 40%. And number 3, which is very close to number 2 at 44%. So some interesting results, very similar to 2 and 3.
Okay. So again, for those of you that are only just starting in this area or really don't know much about it at all, hopefully you're going to walk away at the end of today with a little bit more knowledge under your belt as to sort of like what's involved in this. And for those of you who've been doing this, hopefully you're also going away with a few extra knowledge pieces on what's actually involved in the whole corporate social responsibility, in particular if we're going down the Sedex SMETA path. Okay, alrighty, so let's just keep moving on this. Okay, so like I said, although there are many corporate social responsibility standards, SMETA is one of the most widely used and accepted tools. It's very world recognised around the world. So what's in it? And look, I'm just talking top level now because we will actually go through we'll go into the sections, not give you a bit more of a detailed overview of what's in it in a few more slides, but just in generally, it covers a very wide range of topics actually. So it covers everything from labour standards to health and safety and the environment. And they have based their audit methodology on the Ethical Trade Initiative. You might have heard of the ETI base code and the International Labour Organization conventions as well. Now, when a business decides, okay, I think we've got to go down the corporate social responsibility path and we want to do the SMETA audit, when you come to sign up, you can choose whether or not to do what's called a 2-pillar or a 4-pillar. So the 2-pillar is the entry level. Everyone has to do a minimum of a 2-pillar. But for some businesses, you want to go a little bit harder, tougher, longer, more and more. You go for the 4-pillar. And sometimes it's not your choice. Sometimes your customer says, we want you to have a SMETA audit and it has to be 4-pillar. But just understanding that there's 2-pillar and there's 4-pillar, And formula is just more requirements. Okay, so how to prepare for a SMETA audit. Now, this is important at this sort of stage. What we're about to talk about is the current SMETA standard, and currently it's SMETA 6.1. That's the version that's out now and people are being audited to now, that sort of thing. There is imminently a new version of SMETA coming out called version 7. It's not out yet. It is imminent. We're expecting it, to roll out potentially from next month onwards. But we don't. We have to just base this on the current SMETA standard, which is 6.1. But for some of you that may be coming to today's presentation and then maybe not pick up with going down this path for another 6 months or so, please check, because SMETA 7 is on the horizon and will be out before we know it. Okay. Now, as an auditor, one of the most difficult parts of a SMETA audit, as much as I love them, the difficult thing is, and for me and for the business, is the sheer volume of information we need to get through in a very limited amount of time. So whilst what I'm about to tell you is not mandatory, I strongly encourage you to get the following information together prior to the audit. Now, this is in addition to your SAQ that you would have completed. So Sedex asks you for some background information. You fill out this document called an SAQ. I'm asking for additional information on top of that. It actually becomes very helpful if you can get this sort of information together. So the sorts of information we want you to get together before the audit is information about the site and all the building details. How big is the site? How many buildings do you have on the site? How many levels are on each of those buildings, and what happens on each one of those levels? And what is the floor area of each of those levels? Not difficult information, but hey, if we're in an audit and we've got a lot to do and you're like, right, okay, I'm just going to go out and check sort of like some data on how big the site is and, the floor space of this level, it just takes away time. So if we can get this information beforehand, it is really going to help. You may know, especially for you, those of you that have started with your ethical audit journey, but for those of you who are new to it, be aware that the SMETA audits require us to interview staff. Now, the interviews that we do during these audits is based on the workers. That the number of interviews we do is based on the workers that work at your site. It's like we have like a little statistical program based on the number of, say, male workers, female workers, non-binary workers, permanent workers, casual workers, migrant workers, that sort of thing. So you need to make sure that you know how to find all this information, because based on that is how we're going to choose our sample for the interviews that we sort of conduct. We also ask you to know before the audit, start drilling into your data and start looking at staff turnover figures. How many people left last year versus how many people left this year, and try and do a year-on-year comparison so we can sort of see, like, oh, wow, like, last year they only lost, 2%, and this year 70% of people have left. Like, wow, what's going on there? Or maybe it's reversed. So, but again, we don't wait till the day of the audit to start trying to find out this data, trying to find out this information beforehand. It's going to be really valuable. How many workplace accidents did you have last year versus this year? That sort of thing. So it is important to get this information together so the audit can be more effective. The other sorts of things is understanding or knowing the nationality of your management, of the people that work at your facility. If we can get some of this data before the audit, it's going to be really helpful. Knowing the gender breakdown of your management and your supervisors. Yes, of course, you might be getting this information together a couple of weeks before the audit. By the time we get out there, someone might have resigned or something. But, we basically going down that path. Just don't wait to the day of the audit to start looking at these numbers. Get the information together on the number of labour hire companies you use. Are you using 2? Maybe actually one of your other sites is using 4. Like, who are the labour hire companies that you're using? Or maybe you're not using them, but know who they are. If you've got contracts with them, make sure you get them out and they're available. If you decide to go down the 4-pillar path instead of a 2-pillar audit, getting data together on your usage of your electricity, your gas, your water. Honestly, you don't want to be in a SMETA audit when we've got a lot to cover and you're already going, oh, okay, right. Can someone find the electricity bills for last year and this year and start trying to work it out? It's going to be too stressful to be trying to get that information together during the audit. So we really encourage you to be thinking about this and getting this together before the audit. Now, for the clients I audit, and I can only, I suppose, sort of just speaking myself and sort of like BSI, we always send these requirements to the site in the form of like a template and ask you to complete this beforehand. And I stress, unlike the SAQ, which is mandatory, this additional information, not mandatory. I've done a lot of audits. The more of this information you can get before the audit, the more, the audit is just, it's going to just run a lot more smoothly. Okay. So we've talked in the last sort of slide or two about preparation before the audit, and preparation before the audit is key. Get that information together before the audit. Now let's move into actually having a chat about what happens at the audit. What sorts of documents and records is the auditor likely to request? Now, this is not an exhaustive list by any means. Auditors will go down audit paths or audit trails. So if something's happening, they're going to ask for a bit more information. So I'm not saying this is 100% an exhaustive list, but these are the sorts of things or the typical information that's requested. But you could get asked, for a lot more. Okay. So one of the first sections that comes up in the audit is a topic on universal rights. And so you're going to get asked about, do you have a human rights policy? Can you show it? Can you bring it in? And who is responsible in the business? And it needs to be someone quite senior who is responsible for human rights within the business. We're going to ask you about if there were any human rights issues. How do people report these, and how can they report these confidentially? Linked to that, maybe separately, grievance mechanism. Having a grievance procedure and a grievance mechanism is a really key section or area for these SMETA audits. And having that all documented and knowing how the system works, you need to be able to explain this to the auditor. Not only are you required to have a system in place for grievances, we're going to be looking for evidence that people have been trained in this, that your managers, that your supervisors have been trained in the grievance procedure, but also too that your workers know what to expect if they have a grievance or someone's taking a grievance against them. What is actually the business's processes? We'll be looking for evidence of that. Data privacy, worker information. So sometimes when I ask for information on how do we keep, information private at the business has a lot of information about how they keep their formulations or their recipes confidential, and rightly so. Otherwise, your competitors will know exactly how you do things. This isn't about your products. This is about how do you keep. You have a lot of workers working at your business, and you may have some very confidential information about them, maybe about their health, maybe about an issue that has happened at work, about their pay rates. This needs to be kept confidential. How do you keep this information about your workers confidential? Is it all locked down, or can anyone print it and maybe gets left on the printer for anyone to sort of see? So what sort of processes do you have in place about keeping your workers' information confidential? The next section in the audit is this management systems, I should say, and code implementation. One of the first sections in this part is about measuring worker impact, and it's all about worker turnover. How many people, left the business last year versus this year? And remember, I talked about getting some of this information together prior to the audit. if you wait till the day of the audit to start trying to calculate, okay, so last year, like 20 people left, percentage of that stuff, I'm not saying you can't get it done, but it puts an extra bit of stress in the business. So we're going to be asking for this information. It'd be great if you were already prepared for some of this information. Business licenses. So everything from, your business license to you may need a license from your local environment protection authority because you have a business that, pollutes or discharges into the, water system or something like that. So if you need licenses to operate, have those licenses available just to show the auditor, and we can jot down details of those. A big part of the audit is actually knowing who owns the land where the business is operating. So does the business own the building and the land, or are they leasing it? Now, whatever the answer is, you have to be able to show objective evidence for that. So if you say, we're just leasing the land, we don't own it, you need to show the lease agreement. If you say, no, we own this, you need to show something that you own it. So have that sort of information available. It is a requirement that all the staff on site have been trained in the whole, SMETA audit protocol, that they know what's involved in this audit, what's in the standard, what sorts of topics are covered. So that the auditor is going to ask you about, training in this and what staff have been trained and what they should know. And then, of course, they will ask their workers a bit about this when they're speaking with them during the interviews or maybe when they're walking around the facility. You'll be asked about any fines that the business has been issued by a government authority in the last 12 months. If you got a fine 10 years ago, well, probably moved on from there. But if you have had a fine within the last 12 months, then we'll actually ask for details of that. They'll ask you about, do you have any other international standards in place? So you might have ISO 9000 in place. You might have an international food safety standard. You might have BRC. You might have SQF or something like that. So you've got, or an environmental standard. If you've got some international standards in place, bring it up, show them. Let us record that. About it's not right or wrong. If you don't have another international standard in place, it's not like a non-conformance, but it is good to know if the business has any other standards in place. Now, this last point is important too, and it's about, do you have policies as a business about the latest standards of your suppliers? So if you think about this, sometimes you might be being asked to put in place to have a SMETA audit or corporate social responsibility audit from a retailer that you supply. They say, you supply to us, you need to do this. We then now want you to go, okay, who is supplying us with raw materials and services? Like, who is our supplier of hairnets? Who is our supplier of cleaning? Who is our supplier of raw materials? Do they have labour standards in place too for their workers? Because if you're doing the right thing and putting all this in place, but you're buying from suppliers that don't have corporate social responsibility standards in place, the business needs to make a decision as to sort of like whether or not that is a risk to your business or whether or not you want to start managing that as well. So making sure you're able to talk about your the labour standards for your suppliers. Okay, there's a whole section on freely chosen employment. So we're asking you do you have a forced labour policy? We wanted to make sure that you've actually written down somewhere that, you don't force people to work for you. And again, one thing is writing down these policies, but you need to be able to show training. You need to be able to show training that your managers and your staff have been trained on what is freely chosen employment. So they know what to look out for. They know what's not okay. So you have the policy also show that you've actually provided some training to your workers in this as well. We're looking for evidence that staff are free or the workers are free to resign from your business and leave if that is what they want. They are not held at your business forevermore. And so the sorts of things we look at is sometimes employment contracts will sort of say, termination, both sides. If you want to leave the business, you need to give us X number of weeks notice. So a typical one could be if you want to resign with all your entitlements paid out, you need to give us a minimum of 2 weeks' notice. We're looking for that sort of thing. We're looking to see that workers know that if they don't like it there anymore and they want to leave, they are free to leave. We ask a bit of information about if there are loan scheme going on in place to people. Does the business lend people money? Because obviously we need to make sure it's fair and equitable if any loan schemes are in place. We talked a little bit earlier, a few slides ago, when we were talking about ESG, about modern day slavery. So in Australia, again, that requirement, once a business has got a turnover of $100 million or more, that requirement to submit a modern day slavery statement. So, auditors are going to be asking to have a look at that. Now, different countries are going to have different requirements regarding that, but most are now starting to have a requirement regarding this sort of thing. Your auditors will be looking for evidence or asking you questions about you understanding your supply chain. So you've got your workforce that work at your business, but what about your supply chain? Like we were talking about earlier, who are the people that supply raw materials and services to your business? And do you understand where the risk of forced labour or trafficked labour could be getting into your business by that way? And what are you doing about that? Under freedom of association, there's a whole section on this, and so we're looking for policies that says that people that work at our business are free to join a union or not to join a union. Either way, it is their choice. So yes, they can join a union. There will be no discrimination against them if they don't, but also if they don't want to join the union too, they're free not to do that as well. But we're looking for policies that specifically state that. And we're looking at the fact that you've actually trained people in this, that they know that is their freedom. The second point there is EBA, enterprise agreements, different names in I suppose, sort of like different countries, but not everybody enters into an enterprise agreement, but if you do, if the workers have come together and conditions such as pay rates and hours of work and break times and things like that have been agreed, please provide that enterprise agreement. We will need to look at that. If unions do operate at the site, details of the names of the unions. Something interesting to keep in mind about unions and worker committees, which is our next point there, like a health and safety committee or a worker committee. If you have a union on site, or you have union delegates, or you have a worker committee, think about inviting them to come to the opening and the closing meeting of your SMETA audit. You're not going to get a non-conformance if you don't, but it does get reported. So the auditor is noting whether or not a union delegate or someone from the worker committee attended the opening and the closing meeting. And if they didn't, they'll just make a note as to why. How do workers know who their representatives are? Do you put photos up on the wall? Sometimes some union members say, we keep that all to ourselves. We don't put stuff on display. But how do people know who they go to in their business if they've got an issue? And then how effective are these unions or worker committees that you have on site? So maybe this is the time to sort of say, the worker committee, people were complaining about the car park. They're doing night shift. It's dark. And the car park is uneven. It's easy to fall, or feel it's a bit dangerous. And we've got lighting installed. We raised it with management. We've got lighting installed or something like that. So it's really it's show off how sort of like effective these committees actually are. All right, big piece on health and safety and the SMETA audits. There's lots in here. I'm just going to go through some of the topics. If you provide accommodation for your workers, that will be part of the audit. They will need to go and review the accommodation. But they're also looking at health and safety procedures, who's in charge of health and safety at the business, day training, risk assessments. Some manufacturing sites have some pretty, sort of dangerous type of processing equipment? Have you risk assessed that? Do you know how people stay safe while operating those pieces of equipment? Do your staff need licenses for the sort of equipment that they're operating, such as forklifts? Make sure that you've got those. Having a hazardous chemical register on site. Fire is a big part of the health and safety component during these audits. When the auditor is doing the walk around, they're looking to make sure all exits are unlocked. People can get to the fire doors, and these doors actually open and are not locked. But we're looking to see that you actually test. You do an annual fire drill, and records of those are kept. The equipment's all tagged and tested. So a massive focus on health and safety at these audits. We're going to be required to have a child labour policy in place, regardless of whether or not there's any children working at your business, and we really hope there is not. But you need a policy on this. You need to actually state in your business, okay, our business, we say we don't hire or employ anybody under this age. Or think about what does the law say in your country? In Australia, our laws are different between state to state. You actually have to take time to think about what does the law say and jot that down. But what I also want you to keep in mind is that although the law might say, I'm just making something up here, so say maybe the law says once someone's 16 and a half, they're allowed to take full-time work if that's what they want to do. Say they said that. SMETA, however, says that if you've got young people under the age of 18 working at your place, that they're not allowed to work during the night or in dangerous situations. So although the law might allow someone 16 and a half or 17 to be fully employed, SMETA is saying no night work. They're still growing. Look, being a mum of teenagers, I can tell you my teenagers aren't actually asleep at night when they should be. But anyway, SMETA just say they should not be working at that time. The next section, wages. There's going to be a big section on wages at these audits. So normally the people that are interviewed during the audit, they are also the workers whose wages will be reviewed. So we're going to be looking at timesheets, actual pay slips, not some Excel spreadsheet, but actual copies of pay slips, and having a look at the award or the enterprise agreement or whatever it is that says that people should be paid against. And we're checking to see that the pays are right and that the deductions are right. What was I going to say about that? I was going to something to sort of like have ready for the sort of the pays. It is a big part. So 3 different date ranges are chosen. So it'll be the current week, so around when the audit is taking place, a week or a time when there's a peak period, if the business has a peak period, and then one other sort of like time. So the wage section is big, and you really need to be organised for that because it's quite a bit to have a look at. We look at discrimination, so an EEO policy, so just looking at that, looking at, so business taking steps to make sure there's no discrimination, those sorts of things. Regular employment. So we're looking here about, looking at, for examples of whether or not people stay on contract for like a casual employee for, very many years, never being offered a full-time position. We start looking at things like that. We start looking at making sure that people actually have contracts. So whether they're working directly for the business or they're through a labour hire company, is there actual written contracts that set out what people are going to get paid, where they're going to work, what the job is. Looking at labour hire, contracts with any sort of labour hire that you have in place, making sure they're in place. Big section on entitlement to work and immigration. So you can only have workers working at your facility that have the legal right to work at that facility. So we're looking at evidence of that. Again, it's likely to be the people that you interview, that you do the wage checks on. We're also looking to sort of see what sort of evidence that the business has in place to show that they have the legal right to be working. Now, if we're going into the Pillar 4 audit, we're going to, this is like this additional information. If you're going Pillar 4, big part on the environment for Pillar 4. So your environmental procedures, your permits to operate from environmental government authorities, and a lot is on this environmental monitoring data. So remember I talked about pre-audit information. If you can get together the information of your electricity use for last year versus this year, and you've done that before the audit, it is going to make this section a lot more streamlined. If you are waiting till the auditor gets to this section and you start looking for electricity bills or gas bills or water bills or waste bills, it's going to be quite stressful. Which is why I'm saying try and get this information together before the audit. An aspects and impacts register. Does the business actually know, like each step in their process, what sorts of impacts your business might be having on the environment and what sorts of controls you have in place? So we get into this sort of stuff if we're doing a Pillar 4 audit. If we're doing a Pillar 4 audit, we also do this additional topic regarding business ethics. And look, corruption is bad for society and it's bad for businesses, right? So this is all about seeing whether or not the business has got in place anti-corruption policies in place. What are they doing in relation to this sort of space? And again, there will be a requirement that the business have policies related to this documented. And again, we're going to be looking for training records that people understand the company's policies on gifts and purchasing and things like that. So they're most likely to target the people that work for a business that this would impact more, like your sales department, your procurement department, those sorts of people, and just making sure that they have been trained in the business's policies in this. But look, that's a takeaway message. Any corrupt behaviour, it doesn't help society, it doesn't help businesses, so we're trying to build these out. All right, I think we've got to poll 3. Bang.
We do. This is our final poll for today. I'm conscious of time. Would you like to be contacted by our team regarding SMETA audits? Just yes or no. And a few seconds to fill that in. Thank you for those. And a variety of people have said yes and no, so thank you for that, and we'll be in contact if so. And we might just move on because I'm conscious of time here. Look, thank you for your patience here. A few glitches at the start, but we did get a few questions come through the system here, so thank you for that. At the same time, I might read out a few questions, and there's a few here, but I'm conscious of time. Number 1 question, can you fail a SMETA audit? Which is an interesting question.
Yeah.
And
do you want me to help with that answer, Glenn, or are you across that?
No, that's fine.
Okay, great. Well, look, it is a good question. I think a lot of people, it's probably on their mind. Look, no, there is no pass or fail for a SMETA audit. The audit is designed to foster continuous improvement and to drive responsible corporate social responsibility practices. And look, as an auditor, I audit against a lot of different standards, and some standards I audit against do have pass and fail. And one of the things I like about the SMETA audit is that part is removed, because that does create a bit of stress for the people that you're auditing. Like, oh my goodness, how are we going? Are we going to pass? Are we going to? With the SMETA, it is, look, if something is not in place, it is not in place. And yes, it may get raised as a non-conformance, but it's about just dealing with that. So it is very much a continuous improvement program.
Thanks, Magella. Next question comes from Malaysia. Is it legally permissible to suspend a worker without pay for up to 2 weeks while an investigation is conducted to determine fault?
That's not fully across Malaysian law. I would have to have a look into that and get back to it. I think we all have to take that one on notice. Quite possibly not, but I think we better sort of like have a look into that.
Okay, question 3. How often should a SMETA audit be done?
Yeah, good question. The standard itself doesn't mandate like a frequency, like unlike sort of like say maybe BRC, depending on your grade, you're either going to be every 6 months or every year. SMETA doesn't do that. Usually the frequency is agreed with your customer. So a particular retailer or big customer may say, we require SMETA audits to be done at whatever frequency, 12 monthly, every 2 years or whatever. And they may also say that is dependent on the findings. Again, I know I said there's no grade and there is no grade, but the frequency might just be something that you discuss with your customer based on findings, or maybe just how often that customer thinks these audits should be done.
Thanks, Magella. Next question. Our company engages security guards through a security company. Do I need to check the security guard's payslip and accommodation conditions?
Yeah, we would be looking at sort of the scope of the audit. So as part of your supply chain, so if the security company, if you're doing security in-house, it will be part of this audit. But if they are a supplier to you, we are looking to see that you understand your suppliers and what are the risks involved in this space, and so are they being paid properly and where are they living? And it may be that the auditor may also be interviewing them as part of the audit.
Thanks, Magella. Another question. We've got a few minutes to go here. If our company has engaged a recruitment agency that has zero recruitment fee policy, and we have both signed a contract and a video recording of the foreign workers during the selection process, it raises concern. During our audit, workers mentioned they still be paid recruitment fees to the agent if we present the contract and video. Interesting question, but
yeah, very, because at 100% it's against sort of like SMETA requirements that anybody have to pay any recruitment fees. So if the workers are saying they are being made to pay recruitment fees, even if the recruiter is saying they don't, that is definitely an area for the audit. We would be going down that trail to be looking to see whether or not we can actually get any evidence on that. That would definitely be of concern.
Thank you. And a couple more questions. Do you get a certificate after completing a SMETA audit?
Good question, Ben, and a lot of people ask this.
No, there is no certificate. You don't get something to frame and pop up on your wall, and I know that's different to a lot of other standards that you might get audited to. But what you can do, and this is how it works, is that you become a member of Sedex, which is the organisation that has the SMETA audit tool. You become a member, you go on their database, and people, like say customers, if they want to know if you've had a SMETA audit, they just log in and they can see, oh yeah, such and such company, they've had their audit, they had it a month ago, they've got a few non-conformances, they're dealing with that or whatever. That's how it's dealt with through Sedex or the SMETA audit. But there's no certificate like that typically you see in other audits.
Thank you. And we've just got time for one final question. How many workers are interviewed during the audit?
Yeah, again, good question. And it depends on the number of workers that a business has. So it's like a sliding scale. So say, for example, you had between 100 and 500 workers. I think there's a total of 26 workers that would get interviewed for that. And just by way of, like, I suppose, keeping an eye on how long that would take, that would probably take about 6 hours to interview all those workers. So, yeah, the worker interviews, it's dependent on how many people work for the business, including labour hire. And then that's how long it takes. So, yeah, comes down to numbers. All comes down to numbers.
Thanks, Magella. Apologies if we haven't answered your questions, everyone, but look, we've got them here. We've got your contact details, so we're happy to respond after the event. At this time, we'd like to bring the meeting to a close. We've now come to an end of our time in this webinar, and I'd like to thank Magella for sharing her insights and experience with us today. Thank you all for joining us in the webinar. Apologies for the few glitches we had at the start of the webinar, but that's technology for you. We hope you have found value in this information. We'll be sending through a recording for you. If you don't receive this, feel free to reach out to our marketing team on marketing.au@bsigroup.com. I'll just say that again, marketing.au@bsi.com. Thank you once again, and we hope to see you on one of our other webinars soon. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, man.